Well, it's composed of what are called three baskets. One basket is the code of practice for monks, the Vinaya, uh, and this does seem to have remained intact for ever since, really. And one could argue that the monastic orders are the oldest institution in the world, really, in terms of their capacity to adjudicate over their own affairs and to promote a way of life and to work as an institution. So that's the Vinaya, the monastic code. Then there are the suttas, which are the texts for particular situations. And these are more like almost stories, where it's like one occasion the Buddha was doing this, and it describes the circumstances. Sometimes there's quite a lot of narrative in these, and sometimes there's a lot of discussion of different characters, and we build up a sense of a lot of different characters through the suttas and their predispositions and their excellences, really. And then the third basket is something called the Abhidhamma, which means literally higher teaching. And this is the this is the breakdown of what goes on in the mind, not on a particular occasion in the suttas, which describe a particular event, but it's like an attempt to describe what goes on in the mind on that occasion, on a particular occasion when the mind is, say, mindful, what factors are there. And it describes matter and mind as being very quick moving, in the sense that thought moments arise just for a moment, as do moments of matter, which arise for 17 thought moments. And it's like an ever-moving stream of consciousness, which is described in great detail and with a great regard for how mind and matter relate to one another. So this is very, very popular in Southeast Asia. A number of Western scholars used to think that it was just a scholastic exercise, but quite clearly in modern times it's used very popularly as a form of psychology. It is a very good psychology of the mind, and it is very subtle and nuanced in its applicability. And it has certainly been argued that was the case at the time of the Buddha as well. So it's very, very popular in Burma particularly, and in Thailand. So those are the three baskets, and these are the teachings that we take from the time of the Buddha or shortly afterwards. The suttas also include a lot of narratives and stories and poems. So they're a very rich literary collection as well as a teaching collection.
And what are some of the key texts that you find in the Pali Canon that have formed the basis of Buddhist thought?
Well, I've tried to choose some in the talks. The Sutta on mindfulness is very important. The Mahāsatipaṭṭhāna-Sutta, and
that's like the classic instruction on how to meditate, right?
Yes, on how to arouse mindfulness in daily life and in meditation. Yes. For meditation itself, I'd say the Samaññaphala-Sutta, which is really set in a very beautiful story, as I try to explain. And that describes some of the meditations that are possible through absorption or samadhi. And so it describes the jhanas, the deep meditation states, which are needed alongside the more mindfulness-based and wisdom-based teachings that we find in the Mahāsatipaṭṭhāna-Sutta. So those two suttas really, I think, are quite crucial. They form a pair in a way of giving different kinds of teaching. Another very important text is some quite short ones from the very early collection, the Sutta Nipata. So we get the Metta Sutta, the Discourse on Loving Kindness. And this is really the classic text for Buddhist countries. If you ever want to wish anybody well, or you go to a ceremony to bless a house or a new baby or a new event, you would chant the Metta Sutta. But it's also a meditational instruction too, in that it shows how loving kindness can be cultivated as a mindfulness throughout the day. So that's quite an extraordinary text, and it is very, very popular in southern Buddhist countries, as are the Mangala Sutta, the Ratana Sutta. These are also auspicious texts, encouraging ways of life which will promote happiness. And this, again, would all come under the category of yoga to an ancient Indian. They would all be considered part of the same field of activities.
How likely is it that the teachings attributed to the Buddha in the Pali Canon were what he actually said and taught?
I mean, we simply don't know. I take it the other way around. Why not? They're supposedly given to us by his disciple Ananda, who had an extraordinary and capacious memory and just remembered them all and relayed them. And in the centuries after the Buddhist death, there are various attempts. People remember events or teachings that hadn't got into this first council, and so suttas gradually are incorporated, we gather. But my feeling is, why not? That's what it says it is, so I don't see why not. I also feel that, in a way, I'm not entirely sure that it's that important. If you see that throughout the history of Buddhism, you get new texts and new narratives describing how texts have been found in caves or were buried for hundreds of years to be found several hundred years after the Buddhist death. Now, obviously, the rationalist in one says, well, that can't be the case. That's clearly not true. But there's another point of view where, if we take the Buddha as the fully awakened one, the idea that the fully awakened one could in some way, or that some teachings or new teachings could arise which were entirely in the spirit of his teaching and recreated it for a new generation, I feel very happy about. That's my own personal feeling. I don't feel this historicist sense that one has to go back to the true, in inverted commas, word of the Buddha.
Sure.
Personally, but I think it is interesting that the collection I quite often cite, the Sutta Nipata, does appear to be in a very ancient language, and the poems and suttas in that have a kind of beauty and a slightly unstructured organicism that you sort of feel really is close to the word of the Buddha. I do anyway, and I feel that they probably do really represent the very earliest form level of the Buddhist text. That is my own feeling. Many scholars would agree with me, but I wouldn't even begin to go into the whole debate about the dating of the text. But I think most scholars would agree that the Sutta Nipata is certainly very ancient.